Although the format became more sophisticated, the Calverts still wanted the freedom kept and proudly boasted that City was the only free radio station in Britain. Radio City had gained in value from £5,000 in 1964 to an estimated £200,000 in July 1966. Radio Caroline and the news station Radio London knew of City's potential. In May 1966, the Radio London organisation fully recognised this potential, and Alan Clark, who was a DJ on City and is now working on Dutch World Broadcasting System in Holland, sent a tape of his memory of the pending merger.
In the summer of '66, Radio London, which was, of course, the top pop station of the day, made advances to Radio City and put a proposition to them that Radio City should cease to be and should instead become UKGM, United Kingdom Good Music, a kind of sweet music station.
The merger was to start on the 1st of June, but because of technical difficulties, Radio London decided to take over on the 1st of July. Black Prince remembers the atmosphere on the station.
The atmosphere on Radio City at the start of 1966 was absolutely incredible. It wasn't anything like I imagined it was going to be. There was this bunch of fellows that were really dirty, stuffing their faces full of the most unedible looking rubbish that consisted of the main part of baked beans, I think. And generally just doing their own thing. I mean, we used to walk in and out of each other's studios, or if someone had a programme. I don't think anyone took much notice of that. I mean, I used to drop in on other people's shows, and they used to drop in on mine. I was out there for far too short a time, really. I was out there really only a matter of weeks, and when I came off, I heard that there were rumours of a takeover bid. We knew that there'd been financial difficulties, and there were stories of Radio London, Radio Caroline, trying to take over the station.
The crews continued transmitting from their forts in the sea. The public were told nothing of the mergers. They had a more regular programme format, and with new equipment extended their transmitting time from 6 a.m. to midnight. Then, on the 18th of June, the merger was officially announced, and that afternoon Calvert received a telephone call from a Mr. Oliver Smedley, a director of the organisation with which Radio Caroline was involved.
My husband had a phone call from Mr. Smedley. He said he was quite upset about the merger and that he wanted to buy Radio City. He'd been on this tack for quite a long time, but of course he never came up with any money. So my husband said he was sorry, but this was a better deal. It meant that he didn't lose Radio City, but he would be assured an income. Well, after that, he went off to Manchester auditioning some groups, and the next morning, on the Monday morning, Radio City was silent.
Then on June 19th, almost exactly 2 years from when Calvert and Such started their hoax, Radio City became headline news again. At approximately 3 a.m. on the 19th of June, a party of 10 boarded Radio City whilst the DJs were asleep. They were awakened and told not to go near the transmitter, and that if they resisted, the aerial mast would be cut down. The boarders took the crystal out of the transmitter, which completely immobilized it. They also took the microphones and told the DJs that they'd come to stop the use of any transmitter that was partially owned by somebody else. This mystery person was, in fact, a man called Major Oliver Smedley. The transmitter in question was the one that stood idle since it had been obtained by City from Radio Caroline. Ian West, the engineer on the station at the time of the boarding, relates.
Yeah, it was about 3 o'clock in the morning when they boarded. I was asleep at the time. First I knew it was a bloke with a torch saying that he'd come to protect us because he thought there was going to be a takeover. He was told there was going to be a takeover. Now this bloke turned out to be Oliver Smedley, and it turned out that he in fact was the takeover party because he's got a load of what turned out to be something like dockers from Gravesend who'd come to take care of the towers and sort of generally look after us and make sure we didn't go on the air. The idea behind it being that was that he wanted, that Smedley wanted the towers for some purpose of his own, I think, to sell to somebody else. But this is what happened when they boarded. They wouldn't let us go anywhere if they could help it, and about the first thing I suggested was making a cup of tea, and one of the boarding party said, I'll go and do that, and the tap in the kitchen contains salt water, fresh water being in carboys. So he fills the kettle with salt water. This, of course, we don't discover until we start drinking the tea, which was absolutely horrible. They sort of wandered round in twos everywhere, looking all over all of the other towers and under beds and in cupboards and whatever. Generally a little bit unsure of themselves.
We had no less than 3 channels that we could have communicated with the towers on, and all were dead. Which is nothing. I just didn't believe it. So much so that I ran outside to see if the towers had actually fallen over. It was that bad. And that was the first I knew. I went back and reported Sam, and that was it. He said, well, for God's sake, get out there and find out, which we did. Rouse the boat and the skipper and what have you. And on arrival at the towers, there they were. The towers were just crowded with large men walking all over the place. This was, you know, just take you back. You didn't know what to believe.
Meanwhile, Reg arrived back in London, was told that his appointment with Smedley was arranged for noon. So he went along, and there was Smedley, Kitty Black, Commander Horsley, and a Mr. Lovett. And they confronted him with the boarding party and a piece of paper which they wanted Reg to sign, signing away 50% of Radio City profits.
The next day, Tuesday the 20th of June, Calvert went to the police and told them about the raid. On the evening of the 21st of June, Calvert drove out to Smedley's house in Saffron Walden and was shot dead. The reason why died with him, but Smedley was arrested and charged with his murder. Later, he was tried and found not guilty of murder. Radio Caroline, Calvert's old rival, broadcast a news flash over their station.
Radio Caroline news beat, fast and factual. 37-year-old Reg Calvert, manager of many pop beat groups, including The Fortunes, and owner of the offshore radio station Radio City, was shot dead in a country mansion near Saffron Walden, Essex, early this morning. A man is reported to be helping the Essex police in their inquiries into the shooting.
Eventually, the police boarded the station and questioned the DJs and boarding party, although continually saying they had no authority because of the position of the forts. They took statements from all the people on the fort as mere procedure, saying they still had no power. This, however, was soon going to have a sour twist. At 9:30 p.m. on the 26th of June, the boarding party disappeared as quickly as they had come, and by 10 o'clock, Radio City was back on the air.
Good evening. This is Radio City broadcasting on 299 meters in the medium wave band. And I guess you've all read in the newspapers or heard on radio or TV the events of the past week as far as the station is concerned. So there's nothing more I can say right now than on behalf of fellow DJs Tom Edwards and Alan Clark, technicians Ian West and Phil Perkins, engineers Tony Pine and Paul Elvey, it's pretty good to be back again with you on the 299.
The station did not now have a figurehead. Was it going to close down? Mrs. Calvert was determined that her husband should not have died in vain, and so took over the station herself, retaining ownership and continued running the station.
The boys on the station were extremely upset. I decided to carry on, and they gave me 100% backing. We became a united, happy little family, trying to enlarge the scope of Radio City and improve things.
Then 1967 came. Everybody connected with City was full of confidence, until the 8th of February when it received its death blow. But the DJs knew nothing of this in the early part of the morning.
Indeed, we're having lots of fun this morning. It's the 8th of February. Hard, you know.
For this day, Mrs. Calvert was taken to court in Southend.
And I was summoned by Scotland Yard under the Wireless Telegraphy Act. This act means that you cannot transmit or run a broadcasting station or a radio in England without a licence. Of course, we understood we were outside territorial waters and we didn't need one, which was proved on the one hand and disproved on the other. We were taken to court. My solicitor prepared a very good case, and we proved that we were outside territorial waters, and also the fact that the court was not empowered to try this case because we were on the high seas. Unfortunately, we were found guilty, and my instructions had been that that night had to be the last night for broadcasting. The boys closed down. It was a very, very moving time, very sad. We all cried, but there was it. That was the death of Radio City.
Radio City's story involved many people, not only the staff, but listeners as well. It was one of the most out-of-the-ordinary stations, certainly not the most powerful. One of its claims to fame was the tallest aerial out of all the pirates, 220 feet of it. The biggest publicity it ever had was connected with tragedy. But for 3 years, City gave the English public something that it had demanded. It was a story not of one station and one man, but the story of the whole rise and fall of pirate radio stations in England. Was it all worth it?
I've been dreaming, too, for the last hour about one of the towers sinking. I've been swimming out there in the water for the last hour. Oh, dear. Clarky, you want to say goodbye on behalf of the 5x4, Mother, do you?
Have you explained why we're saying goodbye, you know?
We haven't said it yet, then.
No.
We haven't had it in the news service yet.
No.
Oh, dear, it's up to me, then, is it?
Yeah, to make the big announcement.
It always happens to me, doesn't it? This happened back in June and all that sort of thing, you know. Anyway, the grim news just received, apparently, is that we have been found to be illegal. This is ridiculous, of course, because, as we all know, there are about 300 stations in Europe which are on the same footing and are basically illegal, including Vatican Radio and the whole bit, you know. But to get to the point, we have to go off the air tonight for the last time at midnight, because this is the way the court has swung the decision in Southend, and therefore Radio City is kaput. No more finita. What can we say without getting into a massive sentiment and rubbish, you know, which I hate doing anyway because it's sort of very false. Of course, we are very sorry about this, but what can we do, you know? And it's the law of the land, and we'll try and abide by it. So, getting back to 5x4, Clarky's just finished his last program. He just realized this and would like to say, of course, goodbye to all the 5x4 listeners. Right, Loopy Lou?
It suddenly dawned on me that 7 minutes ago was my last show on Radio City because of the ruling by the court at Southend. So, as you say, what can you say? Bye-bye to 5x4, bye-bye to 5x4 listeners. Thank you for listening. We might be back on the air sometime. We don't know yet, but for the time being, it's goodbye.
As you've probably heard, ladies and gentlemen, at midnight, Radio City goes off the air for the last time, and I hope that the listeners do something anyway to get us back on the air, because tomorrow morning, when you switch on, there'll be nothing on 299.